Welcome to the Deep Dive, right here on our channel, The Other Opinion. We've pulled together a stack of articles, reports, and pretty much everything we could find about a story that's really had Bollywood fans talking, and honestly, a bit confused and definitely heartbroken.
That's right. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the very complex and, well, frankly, messy situation surrounding the highly anticipated Hera Pheri 3. The main focus is Paresh Rawal's unexpected exit and the legal fallout that's come after.
Yeah, so our mission with this pile of sources is to really dig in. We want to unpack the key events, look at the claims from one side, the counterclaims from the other, figure out what the sources are saying were the potential underlying reasons.
And ultimately understand what this whole saga means, especially for you if you're a fan of this absolute classic franchise. It's quite something. Let's unpack this.
Okay, so first let's set the scene a bit. Hera Pheri. The first film landed way back in 2000. The sequel, Hera Pheri, in 2006. These aren't just movies. They're like comedy institutions in Bollywood.
Totally. And the heart of it, really, is that chemistry between Akshay Kumar, Suniel Shetty, and of course, Paresh Rawal as Babu Gunpatrao Apte Babu Bhaiya.
Babu Bhaiya. I mean, is there a more iconic comedic character? Just beloved? So the excitement for the original trio, plus the original director Priyadarshan, to reunite for a third film after years of rumors and, like, false starts.
Yeah, remember that 2016 attempt that just got shelved?
Exactly. So the anticipation was immense. People were really waiting.
Absolutely. And that's why the reaction to this recent news was so visceral, you know? A lot of people immediately came out saying Hera Pheri without Babu Bhaiya is simply impossible.
Just impossible. Some were even saying the project should just be canceled if Rawal wasn't in it.
And it wasn't just fans feeling that way. Sunil Shetty himself, he was widely quoted saying, it's impossible without Babu Bhaiya.
Right. And he added something like, there's only a 1% chance you can manage without Shyam and Rahul, meaning his and Akshay's characters.
Which really just underscores how completely central Rawal's character is seen to be, you know, to the whole magic of the franchise.
Definitely. Okay, so the first big moment that kind of kicked this all off publicly, that was May 18th, wasn't it?
Yes. Paresh Rawal took to his own X account, his Twitter account, and just announced he had exited the project. This wasn't some leak. He put it out there himself.
And when he was asked about it, I think in a midday interview about why he left, his initial reason seemed quite, well, simple on the surface.
Yeah, he just said, I opted out because today I don't feel like a part of it. Pretty direct.
He sounded quite firm about it, too, saying it was for the time being, though he did add that classic line, never say never.
Right. And it's worth noting, according to the source we looked at, he didn't confirm any of the speculation flying around about money issues, about remuneration being the reason. Not at that point, anyway.
Okay, now here's where things really escalated, and fast. Just a few days after Rawal's announcement, reports started surfacing that Akshay Kumar's production company, Cape of Good Films, they'd started legal action against Paresh Rawal.
Yeah, sources said this happened earlier this week, just before May 25th. It was quick.
And their legal representative, Pooja Titke, was apparently quite blunt about their stance. They claimed Rawal's exit hurt the franchise.
And warned of severe legal consequences. They didn't mince words.
They also went into detail about the significant expenses they'd already put into the project. You know, costs for the cast, the crew, the main actors, logistics, equipment.
And interestingly, they specifically mentioned the shooting of the trailer. That detail came up.
Right. And this is a key point from their legal side, according to these sources. They claimed Rawal had sort of indicated he was involved through a social media post way back in January.
And that contracts were entered into after that social media post. And crucially, they stated that there was some portion of about 3.5 minutes of the film itself that had been shot.
Whoa, hold on. Not just a trailer or a promo, but actual film footage.
That's the claim reported from their side. Yeah, 3.5 minutes of the movie itself.
So their argument is that a social media post back in January was enough to show commitment, leading to contracts being signed and even part of the actual film being shot.
That sounds a bit unusual, doesn't it, for the industry?
Well, their legal representative's statement, as reported in the sources, seems pretty clear on that connection. The January post indicated involvement, which led to contracts and incurred costs.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they also brought up things like reputational damage for the actors who were committed and for the franchise itself. Plus, you know, just the basic fact of disappointing the audience.
All of that apparently factored into the legal notice they served, which claimed damages of 25 crore.
25 crore, that is That's a huge amount. Just for context, that's roughly, what, over $3 million US dollars?
Yeah, around that mark. So
Yeah.
they're alleging really significant losses, both financial and, intangible, like reputation. Wow. Okay, so that's the position from Cape of Good Films, coming out strong with legal action.
Exactly. That's their stance, according to these reports.
All right, so that's the legal challenge from Akshay's side. Paresh Rawal, though, he wasn't just going to let that stand unanswered. He responded publicly, again on his X account, on Sunday, May 25th.
Right. He tweeted that his lawyer, Amit Naik, had sent an appropriate response regarding my rightful termination and exit. Sounded pretty confident.
Yeah, he said something like, all issues will be laid to rest once the other side reads his lawyer's response. He seemed quite sure of his position.
And then sources close to Rawal, they spoke to Hindustan Times, and they really pushed back hard against that idea of him being unprofessional. They called that label unfair and even laughable.
And they directly contradicted that key claim from Cape of Good Films about actual film footage being shot.
Yes, these sources insisted it was only a promo shoot. Purely for announcement purposes, they said, absolutely not part of the actual film schedule.
And they added, didn't they, that the real shoot is planned sometime next year.
Exactly. Which, if that's true, it implies the project was still in very, very early stages when Rawal announced he was leaving.
Yeah. And this source close to Rawal also used some pretty strong language, dismissing the idea that he walked out as the worst theatrical imagination at best.
Oof.
And arguing he exited long before the tent was even pitched. That's quite pointed.
It certainly is. And adding another layer to this, reports also came out saying Rawal had actually returned his signing amount. You know, that initial payment?
Oh, yeah, the token amount. How much was it?
Stated to be 11 lakhs. And reportedly, he returned it with 15% interest.
With interest. Okay.
And Rawal's legal team's claim is that this return happened before they received any legal notice or communication from Cape of Good Films.
Okay, so hang on. He returned the money plus interest, and his side says he did this before they initiated legal action. That does shift the perspective a bit, doesn't it? If true.
It's definitely a significant detail from their side, probably intended to show he acted in good faith or tried to end things cleanly before it got legal.
Right. And maybe the most critical part of Rawal's legal team's position, the core argument, is that the whole lawsuit is unfounded. Why?
Because, according to them, there was no signed agreement, no formal contract. Plus, no narration of the script, and no finalized script had even been provided to Rawal.
So essentially, their whole argument boils down to, how can you sue someone for breaking a contract when there wasn't actually a formal, signed, legally binding contract in the first place?
Precisely. And how can you expect an actor to fully commit to a film when they haven't even received the final script or had their role properly explained or narrated to them?
Yeah, that seems like a fundamental point.
Their argument is basically that Rawal had every right to walk away from something that, in their view, wasn't formally binding yet because those key steps, like having a locked screenplay, getting the actors sign off after a proper narration, and actually signing the contract hadn't happened.
Okay, so you've got these two completely opposing narratives, right? One side saying commitment was indicated, costs were incurred, we even shot part of the film.
And the other side saying, hold on, there was no signed deal, no script, nothing binding. It was just a promo shoot. It's quite the clash.
It really is. Okay, so that's the legal mess, the fallout. But let's try to dig a bit deeper. Based on what the different sources are suggesting, beyond the initial, I don't feel like a part of it, and this legal back and forth. What were the potential underlying reasons for Rawal deciding to leave? What else might have been going on?
This is where it gets interesting, trying to piece together the why from the reports. Several sources point pretty strongly towards a major issue: the lack of a script, or just general clarity about the project.
Right.
They suggest Rawal's discomfort wasn't just a vague feeling. It stemmed directly from not having a bound script, a finalized screenplay, or even a clear narration detailing his character's arc and what the overall story was going to be.
So even though he participated in that promo shoot the Cape of Good Films mentioned, he reportedly hadn't received the crucial details about what Babu Bhaiya would actually do in this third film, like the length of his role, how his character fits into the plot this time.
That's what the sources seem to suggest, Insiders were quoted claiming there was no locked screenplay, meaning no version finalized and approved for actual production at the time of that public announcement, or even the promo shoot itself.
Wow.
And this lack of a script, according to these sources, raised some pretty significant red flags for Paresh Rawal.
And this connects directly to another potential reason mentioned in the reports. his creative reservations. We know Rawal has talked before about being disappointed with Hera Pheri, the second one.
Right, he felt it kind of strayed from the more grounded, relatable humor of the original Hera Pheri.
Exactly. So sources suggest he might have been worried about history repeating itself, that he was being cautious and specifically demanding a proper script and real clarity on the creative direction before he gave his final formal go-ahead.
Makes sense, given his past experience and statements. Then there's a third complicating factor that some reports brought up, a potential fight over the franchise rights themselves.
Oh, what's that about?
Well, Feroz Nadiadwala, the producer of the first two films, is believed to have potentially reclaimed the intellectual property rights to Hera Pheri.
Right.
And some sources allege that he had actually warned others, apparently including Akshay Kumar, against moving forward with a new movie without getting his official clearance first.
Whoa, okay, so there might be a completely separate legal cloud hanging over the whole project about who actually owns the right to even make Hera Pheri 3 in the first place?
That's what some of the sources hinted at, yes.
Weird.
And you can imagine how that kind of murky legal environment, as one report called it, around the basic ownership, could definitely contribute to an actor like Rawal hesitating, right? Makes him less likely to fully commit without absolute clarity on all fronts.
Yeah, absolutely. And then finally, some sources also hinted, maybe more subtly, at some past friction between Rawal and Akshay Kumar themselves.
Oh. Like what?
Well, they pointed to Rawal not being in OMG2. Remember, Akshay Kumar had a central role in that and co-produced it.
And Rawal was the lead, the main character in the original OMG,
Oh
my God, which was a huge hit.
Exactly. So some people read his absence from the sequel as possibly a sign of some deeper creative divergence, or maybe some existing underlying issues between the two actors that could have played a role here, alongside all the script concerns.
Huh. So you put it all together, and based on these various sources, it really doesn't look like just one single thing caused this.
No, it sounds like a mix, right? A confluence of issues. That lack of creative certainty because there was no script, maybe worries based on past creative experiences, these potential franchise rights complexities hanging over it, and possibly some underlying professional dynamics between the key players, too.
It's quite a web.
It really is fascinating how all these different threads can apparently come together and potentially derail a project, even one as huge and anticipated as this. If you're finding this deep dive into all these details helpful, please do us a favor and hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps support our channel, The Other Opinion.
Absolutely, please do. So, okay, we've talked about Rawal's exit, the legal fight, the potential reasons.
Well,
How have the other key players involved reacted to all this drama playing out so publicly? Suniel Shetty, for instance.
yeah, Suniel Shetty, understandably, sounded pretty shocked and, frankly, heartbroken by the news of Rawal leaving. He mentioned finding out about it through the media, just like the rest of us.
Ouch.
Yeah, he's expressed hope that things can be mended and really emphasized that he wants no animosity between Paresh and Akshay. He seems to be hoping for reconciliation.
He also shared some really quite touching details about shooting that promo, didn't he? With the original trio and Priyadarshan.
He did. He said it felt incredibly natural, like 25 years had passed, but in a good way. He talked about this sense of continuity, this deep understanding, and a wonderful give and take between them all on set.
That sounds lovely, like they just slipped back into it.
Totally. He even shared his son Ahan's reaction. Apparently his son asked him, "Papa, what happened? Why?" Just shows the impact. And Shetty mentioned he was planning to actually talk to Rawal after May 23rd, presumably to understand things better.
It sounds like he really values that relationship.
Definitely. And Shetty also shared some great kind of quirky memories from filming the original Hera Pheri with Priyadarshan back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
Like the director's unique methods apparently forbidding actors from ironing their clothes, having makeup deliberately wiped off to look more realistic.
Uh-huh. Really?
Yeah, and even making them sleep on newspapers on the floor between takes sometimes, just to stay immersed in the setting and the characters' lives.
Wow, that's a method. Those little details really bring that history to life, don't they?
They really do. Okay, so that's Shetty. What about Priyadarshan, the director? How did he react?
Well, Priyadarshan himself seems genuinely quite perplexed by the whole situation. He stated he was clueless why this happened because, he claims, Rawal didn't inform us directly about his decision.
So he felt out of the loop too.
Apparently. He confirmed that Akshay had asked him to check in with both Rawal and Shetty beforehand, and that both actors were on board initially when they did that promo shoot together. Everything seemed fine then from his perspective.
And Priyadarshan had an interesting take on the lawsuit too, didn't he?
Yes, he felt that, he personally doesn't have much to lose financially in this scenario. But he pointed out that Akshay has invested money, and that could be the reason why he's taking this action. He saw a direct link between Akshay's investment and the legal move.
That makes sense. Did he say if he'd spoken to Rawal since?
He specifically stated that Rawal hasn't spoken to me till date, meaning up until that report came out. And he shared a really quite poignant detail.
What was that?
He claims Akshay Kumar allegedly had tears in his eyes while asking him, Priyadarshan, Priyan, why is Paresh doing this to us?
Wow. Tears in his eyes. That certainly paints a picture of how emotional this might have become behind the scenes.
It does. And Priyadarshan also, like Shetty, reminisced a bit about the original casting choices for the first Hera Pheri.
Right, how he kind of broke the mold.
Exactly. How he took risks by hiring action heroes like Shetty and Kumar for straight-up comedy roles and casting someone like Rawal, who is mostly known for negative or villainous roles back then, as the iconic comedic Babu Bhaiya.
A decision that obviously paid off massively in the end.
Hugely. Just shows his eye for casting.
Okay, so we've got the exit, the lawsuit, the completely conflicting claims about contracts and scripts, the potential underlying reasons bubbling up, the reactions from Shetty and Priyadarshan. Where does all of this leave the actual future of Hera Pheri 3? Is it happening? Is it dead?
Well, based on pretty much everything the sources report, the theme's future is definitely, well, hanging in the balance is probably putting it mildly. It looks very uncertain.
So, despite Suniel Shetty sounding hopeful publicly that things can somehow be fixed.
Right. Despite his optimism, the general sentiment that comes across in these articles, including from Priyadarshan's perspective, is that it's highly, highly unlikely the film can proceed in any recognizable form without Paresh Rawal playing Babu Bhaiya.
His character is just seen as too integral.
Completely. It sounds like, according to the reports we've looked through, if this film is going to be saved at all, some form of mediation seems to be the only way to salvage the film at this point.
Meaning getting everyone in a room, maybe outside of court, to try and work through these fundamental disagreements.
That seems to be the implication, yeah. But whether that's possible or likely, that's the big question mark hanging over everything right now.
Okay, so stepping back from the specifics, what does this entire really complicated situation tell us? It's clearly much more than just one actor deciding to leave a movie.
Oh, definitely. It's a pretty stark illustration of all the intersecting complexities that can happen in these large-scale film productions, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got clashing creative visions, or maybe just the lack of a clear vision.
You've got the ambiguities between early-stage agreements or indications versus formal signed contracts.
You've got significant business interests and investments potentially clashing with creative demands or an actor's need for clarity.
And then you have the immense, maybe irreplaceable value of a truly iconic character like Babu Bhaiya running right up against these legal claims over money already spent. It's a perfect storm in a way.
It really highlights, doesn't it, that even for these massive projects with huge stars and incredible anticipation from fans, fundamental issues like not having a finalized script locked down.
Or not having clear, formally binding agreements fully in place before you start incurring major costs or shooting anything. Those things can be absolutely critical.
They're potentially disastrous if they're not handled properly. And these details matter to you, the listener, because they kind of pull back the curtain a bit on the actual realities of how these big productions sometimes operate. It shows how different parties might weigh the importance or maybe sometimes underestimate the importance of those creative fundamentals, like a finished screenplay.
Versus, say, just wanting to get some promotional momentum going or doing an initial shoot to announce the project. There can be different priorities at play.
Definitely. If you've been following this story, you probably have your own take, your own other opinion on what went wrong here, or maybe who you think has the stronger case based purely on the claims and counterclaims we've presented from all these sources.
We'd genuinely love to hear what stands out to you the most from this whole deep dive. What's your reaction? Let us know. Share your thoughts in the comments below.
So just to quickly wrap up our deep dive into this very messy Hera Pheri 3 situation, we've covered Paresh Rawal's surprising public exit announcement,
the swift legal action taken by Akshay Kumar's production company, claiming commitment was made and significant costs were incurred,
Rawal's equally firm response, pushing back hard and emphasizing the lack of any formal agreement or finalized script,
The other potential creative, legal, and maybe even personal reasons cited in the various sources for his departure.
And the reactions from the other key figures involved, like Suniel Shetty expressing hope and Priyadarshan expressing confusion and maybe some hurt.
And the future of the film itself, based on all these sources, it remains very much in doubt, especially without Babu Bhaiya.
What aspect of this whole story did you find the most surprising or the most telling? Let us know in the comments. We really do read them.
And please remember, if you found this breakdown helpful and interesting, if you learned something new, please give this deep dive a like right now. It makes a huge difference for us here at the Other Opinion channel.
Absolutely. Also, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our future deep dives. We tackle complex stories and topics like this all the time, trying to make sense of them based on the sources available.
And if you know someone who's a massive Hera Pheri fan, or maybe just someone who's been wondering what the real story is behind all the headlines about this controversy, please share this deep dive with them.
Okay, here's a final thought to leave you with, something to mull over, purely based on the conflicting accounts we explored today from the sources. You have one side claiming a portion of the actual film was shot, and contracts were entered into based on something as potentially informal as a social media indication from months prior.
Right. And then you have the other side claiming absolute no finalized script existed, no formal narration happened, and crucially, no actual agreement was signed before the exit occurred.
What does this fundamental discrepancy, this huge gap in the two narratives suggest about the standard practices? Or maybe the potential for some serious miscommunication, or perhaps just dangerous assumptions being made even at this very top level of the film industry.
It's definitely something to think about, isn't it? What constitutes a deal in these situations?
Indeed. Finally, just a quick note. Please remember that this deep dive was generated by AI, aiming to provide information based on the sources provided to it. While we strive for accuracy based on those sources, some of the information presented here might be incorrect. Always good to keep that in mind. Thanks for joining us on The Other Opinion.